Cooper Kupp said during an interview with the Dan Patrick Show, unprompted, mind you, who were some of the best cornerbacks that he faced over the last couple of years? And he mentioned Jalen Johnson, a player that we have a lot of faith in moving forward. And it goes back. And listen, you know, I know a lot of us Bears fans, we get heckled. People think that we're trying to make Jalen Johnson a thing, a shutdown corner. But listen, if you don't want to hear from me, if you don't want to hear from Bear Down Cuz or Draft Dr. Phil or Ill Will, maybe you'll take the word of the Super Bowl MVP. Maybe Cooper Kupp's word will carry a little bit because Jalen Johnson is on the cusp of being a superstar. And then you combine him with Kyler Gordon, hopefully the rebirth of Eddie Jackson. You brought in Brisker from Penn State. There is an opportunity for this Bears secondary to be the absolute strength of the team. And I don't think a lot of people are ready for that. They want to say that we're going to win 2 games or we're not going to be very good. It's going to be a struggle. I don't know if that's going to be accurate. But again, don't listen to me. You can listen to Cooper Kupp. But right now, listen to me because I'm going to say, Sammy, let's start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome to the Sick Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. We have a big show for you. If you're familiar with my work on the NFL Fantasy Live show, you know that Clay Harbor is one of my dudes. He's going to be joining us here in a matter of minutes. So excited to finally have him on. But you know what? There's a lot going on in the NFL. OTAs are going to be starting here next week for the Chicago Bears, or perhaps they're going on right now, depending on when you're listening to the show. One last chance to take a look at this group before they head off to their summer vacation. Like when all the guys are allowed to leave the oil rig on Armageddon, they're going to be out places unknown doing their thing before they come back to training camp. So there's a lot of stuff. One last look at the progression of Justin Fields and things like that. We had some retirements in the NFL, like Ryan Fitzpatrick he's retired, which is unfortunate because now what do announcers talk about when they can't say that Ryan Fitzpatrick went to Harvard? What are they going to have left to say? There's not much they can say. Of course, Frank Gore also retired. I wonder, think about this. We'll talk about this at the end of the show. Is Frank Gore a Hall of Famer? Put that in your mind. Think about that. Let that swirl around a little bit because right now I want to bring on our guest. I don't want to make him wait too much longer. He is a man from Dwight, Illinois, who went to Missouri State, worked his way to being a 4th-round draft pick of the Philadelphia Eagles, played for the Eagles. He played for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then he went on post-NFL career. You might know him from The Bachelorette. He's well-versed. He's a great guy. He's a great Twitter follow as well. But please welcome to the show, Clay Harbor. Clay, so excited to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm out here in Chicago as we speak. I'm in West Loop, Chicago. I'm from Dwight, Illinois, like you said, born in Libertyville, Illinois. I was born a Bears fan, been through the thick and the thin. It's been a lot of thin throughout my my lifetime, unfortunately.
Too much thin.
I just had lunch with my dad at local Parlor Pizza in West Loop, and the whole time,
no way.
He's talking to me about the Bears, lifetime Bears fan. He's a big 80, always talks to me about the 85 Bears. I'm hoping one of these days soon that I can see one of these championship teams like we did in 1985. And he always talks about, so whenever I have kids, I'll have something to tell them about, a great defense, great team.
Yeah, my dad never shut up about the 85 Bears. It was the highlight of his sporting life of following the Bears for so many years. I will say this though, you were born in Libertyville. That's, if I'm not mistaken, isn't that close to the Wisconsin border? Do we almost lose you? Because that's too close for comfort, I think.
Yeah, it's close. Honestly, it's close to Wisconsin border. I was actually from I grew up in Waukegan before I moved down to Dwight, Illinois, which is more central Illinois, but I grew up in Waukegan.
Okay, see, it's very scary. Who was the guy though when you were growing up? Who was the Bears player that you liked the most?
Man, I mean, I was a wide receiver, so I don't know if you remember some of these names, but I mean, Curtis
Of
Conway,
course.
Marcus Robinson, Booker, Marty Booker, some of those guys. I mean, I remember the Super Bowl game, with
Mhm.
Rex Grossman and Hester returned the first opening kickoff. I'm at college at Missouri State University, which is a Missouri Valley school, if you're familiar.
Of
They've
course.
got Illinois schools such as Illinois State and Southern Illinois. But I remember that game, watching it with my brother in my basement in college and thinking we're about to win the Super Bowl. But Marcus Robinson, Curtis Conway, Marty Booker, those guys were some of the receivers when I was growing up, coming up. I'd always watch and like them. I even like Johnny Knox before his injury happened.
Yeah.
Justin Gage had a good little stint with the Bears. Just looking back at some of those guys, Desmond Clark. I was a tight end. I used to like Desmond Clark. When I started playing tight end, and those were my favorite players.
Yeah, Curtis Conway was one of my guys. He went to one of the I think it must have been Long Beach Poly.
Yeah.
Went to USC. Then he went to UC. Then he went to the Chicago Bears. So he was always somebody that I loved. Like that was one of my favorite guys when I was growing up a little bit too. I'm actually closer. I'm actually not far behind him age wise, but yeah, I remember him. Like he was somebody that we looked up to in Southern California. So to see him go to the Bears was a thrill. That was a good team though. That 2006 team with Lovie Smith. You love the way they play defense. You love the special teams.
Briggs, Mike Brown. You have Hester. That was a great team. Loved watching it. Didn't miss a game. That was the Denny Green. The Bears are who we thought they were. That year they beat them. So that was a fun season.
No, that was amazing. And I think that was a Leinart game because I think Leinart was the quarterback of the Cardinals. And I remember just the way that unfolded. Like that couldn't have been better. It was such a fun time to be a Bears fan. And I know that we're both kind of like, I was alive when the 85 Bears won the Super Bowl, but not like as a lucid adult, where I would really be able to enjoy it. But I will say this, Clay, and I would like to get your opinion on it. With Matt Eberflus and with a lot, and when you hear him talk and you hear or you see the way that Ryan Poles addressed the draft, you start to get that feeling like this feels a little bit like the Lovie Smith era?
I like Eberflus. I like how Poles, did address the draft. I think that Fields, looking at Fields last year, I don't think they gave him a lot of help, and he didn't come into the season. You know what helps a lot is when you're a quarterback and this team is your team, and you get to go through the off season, the OTAs, a training camp, and you get to establish yourself as a leader. He didn't have that last year.
Yeah.
You had Foles, and obviously you had Dalton as the coming into the season were the two guys that were going to be the leaders of this football team and start. So I think that's going to be big for Fields. He gets a full year, he gets the whole off season, instead of coming in the draft as a leader, and he knows what his players and everybody's raving about him in the OTAs, how hard of a worker he is. You love to see that. And I think we gave him a little more help than people give them credit for. Mm-hmm. I know we've been getting murdered in the national media. The Bears have for Eberflus, get this guy a receiver. I think Mooney is a good player.
Yeah.
I think he's a great player. I remember when I first saw him, I go, this guy can play. He runs good routes. He has good hands. He's got good run after the catch. And I think we found some decent talent for a discount. I think Pringle can play. I think St. Brown can play. Then we drafted Velsis Jones. I haven't really got to see him yet, but I've heard good things, in college, looking at some of his tape. I know he's a little older, but hey, I hear he's a hardworking guy and he seems like he's got it going. And I think the most underrated position group, obviously I'm a tight end guy on this team. People saying the Bears need better tight ends. I think this is a strength, in my opinion, the tight ends. I know some people won't agree with me.
No, I love it.
I know obviously Kmet got better. He's ranked 12th in receptions and 12th in yards in the tight ends in the NFL last year, which is solid. Obviously you can get better. He only had one touchdown, whatever. He can improve there. But who I love, and these are guys I've played with in the past and have relationships with, and I'm not saying this just because I know them.
Right.
Ryan Griffin can be a starting tight end in this league. He can catch the ball. He can block. James O'Shaughnessy with the Jaguars. If you have 200, trust me, I played with the Jaguars for 4 years.
Yeah.
You have 250, 300 yards with the Jaguars, the worst offense in the league. You're a solid player. Those aren't easy yards. You're not getting yards like you are if you're with the top offense. Back when I was playing with the Jaguars, we signed Julius Thomas coming off at 1,200 yards with the Denver Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
He comes to Jacksonville Jaguars, same exact player, same skill set. That next year he has 300 yards. If you're with the number one offense, you go the worst offense. You're the same player, still a great tight end. You're just not going to have as many opportunities. I think this tight end group, they can all block, they can all catch, and under the radar, I think you can see some 2 and 3 tight end sets, and these guys can play outside too. Both of them, Griffin, O'Shaughnessy, Kmet. You can do a lot with these tight ends, and nobody's been talking about it, but I think that will be something that the Bears can use to keep defenses off balance on offense, is utilizing these athletic veteran tight ends that are going to know what to do. They know how to block, and then obviously Kmet's your guy, but the 2 backup guys, Griffin, O'Shaughnessy, I will go to bat for all day and twice on Sunday.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things, doing the fantasy show, we used to do we still do a segment called That Helps No One, where we sometimes, no disrespect, Clay, we find the guys who might not be the superstars, but they catch the touchdowns. I remember you played for the Philadelphia Eagles. One of your first games, I think you were playing against the 49ers. I think it was, you had a touchdown. You had 3 receptions you had a great game.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because, here, Clay Harbor, thank you. You come out of nowhere. You stole it. We were starting I'm trying to remember who the Eagles
Brent
receiver would have been.
Probably the tight end.
Brent Selleck, yeah, somebody like that. Clay Harbor's getting these touchdowns.
Yeah, Jeremy Maclin, one of those guys. Yeah.
But you notice these players, and there's obviously ability. We watch, I've seen every one of your touchdowns. Yeah. I've put every one of your touchdowns on the air. And you watch the film and you're like, that's a nice play. And O'Shaughnessy and Ryan Griffin, who we call the family guy, you can see these guys find a way to get open. So I'm with you. When people look at this, obviously it's not Kyle Pitts or somebody like that, but these are guys with ability who can play. And I think a huge thing too, and tell me what you thought over the last couple of years when you watched Matt Nagy's offense. It feels like they never capitalized on all these great players that they had. They had Jimmy Graham. It just seemed like they never took advantage of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And disclaimer, I'm a big Matt Nagy fan, right? When I was with the Philadelphia Eagles, Matt Nagy was our quality control coach. I was with the Eagles for 3 seasons. Nagy was, quality control is basically the assistant of the coaching staff. These guys, they do whatever the coach, they're just running around doing stuff. Nagy was my guy. I'd be like, Nagy, come out and throw me balls before practice. Nagy's like, all right.
He's a great quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah. Before the game, hey, Nags, let's go out. You throw me some passes, get my hands warm. All right, Clay, right away. He was that guy, and he was just such a nice, genuine guy. He's crazy. I'm like, wow, Nagy, when he's a head coach now, this was the quality control guy, literally the bottom of the totem pole. Dude, I would just BS with during practice. We'd have a script. I would stand by him because I liked him more than my tight end coach. I'm like, yo, what's a play? All right, and I talked to Nagy. But Nagy did miss on a lot there. I think he had some guys, you got to be able to utilize Jimmy Graham the right way. Obviously, Jimmy Graham's not looking to block anybody, especially at this point in his career. He was the 3rd-round pick in my draft class. I was a 4th-round pick, 2010. So Jimmy Graham, it's always been his forte. Get him down the red zone, score some touchdown, jump ball, slant. You got a route tree if you get him in one-on-one coverage. Have a play to where, depending on the coverage, linebackers where he's at, you run a slant, and if the linebacker's out in the throwing lane, you run a jump ball and you get the ball to Jimmy Graham. You got Kmet, you can utilize him. But I think this year will be a good season. I think we got some good offensive-minded coaches, and I think he's going to utilize Fields in the right way, move him around a little bit. He's not Aaron Rodgers, and I know Getsy's got to realize that hey, you've been working with Aaron Rodgers for the last few years. Now you get Justin Fields, completely different players. And then on the flip side of that, you got guys saying, hey, this coach worked with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. It's like, okay. That's like somebody coaching Michael Jordan the last 2 years of his career and trying to take credit for Michael Jordan winning a couple championships or having a great offensive staff. Like, hey, you got to show me something now. Now that you got a young quarterback, this is when you have to coach. This is when you show what your value is in this league, not coaching a guy that's been there, seen every defense, knows more than, almost all the quarterbacks in the league as far as what he's seen and what he's done. So looking forward to seeing how they do this year with this staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that again, like in full disclosure, I liked Matt Nagy as I thought I wanted him hired. Like when they hired him, you can go back. Like it's verified. Like you can go through my articles on NFL.com. Like I liked hiring Matt Nagy. I like him as a person. Like I thought like there's a lot of things. I like the club dub. I like that. I just think sometimes when you try to do too much as a head coach, maybe that's a little bit daunting. And this, one of the benefits of having Eberflus in charge is that he's allowing Getsy and his offensive staff to go out there and kind of design some plays. And you see, the success that they had. And again, I know Aaron Rodgers was throwing him the football, but you look at the success like Robert Tonyan had. And a couple of years ago, he had double-digit touchdowns. Like I look at, and I guess that goes back to your point. Like, look, this could be a good part of our offense.
No, absolutely. He gets a lot of guys involved, and that's what you got to do. And I think this offense, there's not many big names, but I love that. It gives guys an opportunity to step up. Komet's a young guy. He should have a breakout season this year. Good tight end, big target. I'm a fan of Kmet. I think he's athletic. He can block pretty well. He's willing. He's young. As a tight end, when I watch a game, the first thing I got to try to talk myself out of watching the tight end, because just naturally throughout the years I'm watching, I'm like, oh, watch the game as a tight end. Okay, what coverage is it? What should he do there? Okay, maybe he shouldn't have did that. That's pretty bad footwork right there for a block. But I like Kmet as a natural critic, natural tight end that's played in this league and had to be a technician because I'm a little undersized. I like what he does. I like his routes. Obviously, I think David Montgomery is one of the more underrated players in this league. I know his average yards per carry wasn't great last year, but if you watch his yards after contact, I think Montgomery's going to have a breakout year. He stays healthy. I love David Montgomery. People ask me, who do I think the best player in the Chicago Bears is? Obviously, you got the Roquan Smith guys.
Right.
Deservedly so. But right now, I'm going with David Montgomery. I love him. I think with that running game, you give him a steady diet of David Montgomery. You mix in some 2 or 3 tight end sets, and I think there's a lot you can do with this offense with that guy. And I also want to shout out one of my good friends I actually worked out with a lot this season because he's a Chicago native, and he's the backup quarterback, Trevor Siemian, Northwestern guy. So Sim City, I call him. But, I love Trevor. I'm so happy he's in Chicago.
Yeah, Northwestern guy, like coming back home to play for the hometown Bears. Have you talked to him? Like, how excited is he to be a part of this team?
Oh, he's pumped. His wife, his kids here. He would have to come back here in the offseason. He had me, I'm 35 years old now, going out in the field and running routes for him. I'm running wide receiver routes. I'm running tight end routes just so he can get his work in because his family's here. When he's going to New Orleans last year. And it's funny talking to him last year. He was like, man, they drafted a quarterback. We got Jameis. They got
they had Ian Book,
and they got Hill and
Tyson
Ian Book,
Hill,
and he's like, I'm gonna get cut. He's like, man, maybe I should just ask for my release. I'm like, hey, you just gotta work through it, man. Just see what tell him what you're thinking. And they said it was an open competition. You went out there and played well, got some reps, and now he signed a nice deal back at home in Chicago. Great guy, hard worker, and it's great that he gets to be here because his home's here. His home was here when he's playing with New Orleans. His house, his people, he loves it here. So it really worked out great for him.
No, I could not be more thrilled for him. And I like Nick Foles, but when it was Trevor Siemian who was coming in, you're like, okay, that makes perfect sense. And I love it. And we're, a lot of people, when you grow up in Chicago or the Chicagoland area, it's like, are you a Northwestern person? Are you an Illinois person?
Yeah.
What is it? My family skewed Northwestern, so it worked out perfectly. Like, this couldn't have been better. Although, and you get Notre Dame people too, so they're happy with Cole Kmet. And going back to the Cole Kmet, the breakout thing. Now it's funny when you're talking about running receiver and tight end routes. You played both positions at Missouri State. I want to get to that in a second, but I've often heard this about the tight end spot, that it's probably the most difficult position to master because you have to basically learn everything that an offensive lineman does, but you also need to know all the routes. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I came into college as a wide receiver, and I gained 60 pounds in college. When they moved me to tight end, I almost transferred because I was so mad I didn't want to play tight end. But honestly, it's a life hack. If somebody listens to this, you got a son that's a good wide receiver but not great, and he's fast, see if he can gain some weight. And if he's tough, you're going to be a good tight end, and you have a chance because it's such a tough position. But if you have that wide receiver skill set and you can run around like that, and you can put on some weight, that's an advantage. Now you're a wide receiver running against linebackers and safeties. I remember going in college from wide receiver. I was a backup receiver at Missouri State as a freshman.
Yeah.
It's hard. Next year they moved me to tight end, and I go, no way. I go, this is how difficult this position is. I go from running against these cornerbacks, now I'm running against a middle linebacker half the time, and an outside linebacker and a safety. I go, man, this is easy. Obviously, the hard part comes with these wide receivers is blocking. Yeah. I was a tough, scrappy guy, so I just had to put on the weight. If you're a scrappy guy, you can put on some weight. You got a chance to make the league if you got the size. So the problem is you got to find a guy that can do both, because the benefit of a tight end comes with matchups. Yeah. If you're a tight end that can't block, they're just going to guard you with a nickel cornerback. If you can block as a tight end, then they got to bring in an extra linebacker, because you're going to manhandle the nickel cornerback, and you're going to run the ball down their throat. So if you got to be able to block, that's why Gronk, in my opinion, is the greatest tight end in NFL history. I think Travis Kelce's great, and obviously receiving-wise, he's great, but Gronk can block like an offensive lineman. This guy is a bone-crushing blocker. He's got perfect technique. His hands are inside. He makes plays. When I was with New England, I remember I was so excited about the experience just to watch Rob Gronkowski play. To this day, I can't tell you why he's the greatest. He just is. I'm looking at his routes. I go, okay, that's nothing crazy. His hands, I mean, he'll drop a ball here or there. His hands aren't crazy. I'm looking, I'm like, wow, like this guy just, he's a great blocker. He can move, he can run, he makes plays in traffic, but it all comes back to that full service tight end, tough position to master. You got to be able to have the right footwork, be able to block and run routes and make catches in traffic.
Yeah, and you got a late start too, because when you were in high school, you were predominantly a basketball guy or baseball, but when did you switch over to football?
So I played football my whole career, but I wasn't very good. I didn't care as much about football as I did basketball. I was a point guard. I was a skinny point guard in basketball. I could dunk from a step inside the free throw line. I wish they had phones back then. You could record some of the stuff. So my friends don't believe me, because now, heavy ducks can't fly. But when I was 170 pounds, I could jump. And then my senior year came around in football, and I was all conference player, but I had a really good season. But I'm from such a small town in Dwight, you're playing 2A football in Illinois in 8 classes. It's tough to get noticed, but I had like 22 touchdowns, 1,500 yards. And then I got hurt my senior year of basketball. So the teams that were really looking at me dropped out. So I'm like, all right, I might as well go play football with my brother, who had got a football scholarship the year before to go to Missouri State. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to go play football with him. And at first I was regretting it a little bit. I got redshirted as a wide receiver. Then the next season, I'm a freshman. I'm not playing much. I'm a backup wide receiver. Then the next year, a couple tight ends get hurt. And they're like, Clay, you're our biggest receiver. We want you to move here. And that's when I said I was thinking about transferring. I'm like, dude, I don't want to play tight end. Then I ended up playing it. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a lot easier to get open and make plays as opposed to being a wide receiver. I think I could have got better, and maybe if I would have been really good, I could have made all-conference receiver or something, but definitely not 3-time All-American, get drafted in the 4th round from Missouri State in the FCS, Missouri Valley Conference. So it was a good move, and that time at wide receiver really helped me to be a better tight end in the receiving game.
No, and you had a productive career. You were one of those guys, the maddening guys. I'm sure that if you ever talk to like a Colts fan or a Titans fan, they probably don't like you, because you have the knack for making the plays, like when it would hurt somebody the most, and just being that kind of player. So I always admired that about you, and I thought you always stood out. Did you ever know that I was making fun of you though on the NFL Network? And if you did, I want to apologize right now.
No, I never knew that. I didn't pay much attention to it. I was always a guy that I'm going to come in and I'm going to do my job. And even like with Jacksonville a couple of years, like we didn't have a fullback position. I'm playing fullback. I'm playing fullback. I'm a tight end in the roster, but I'm, on powers, I'm blocking DNs. We're doing ISOs where I'm motioning the backfield. I'm ISO blocking a middle linebacker. I'm doing the little flat routes, and I'm going to do that. And looking back, I think I should have maybe stayed in Jacksonville. When I went to New England, I had the same offer. The Jags wanted to sign me for a few more years, and I ended up going to New England, getting hurt, and then getting released halfway through the season, and I'm bouncing around teams. But I had the opportunity to stay long-term in Jacksonville. So looking back, there's a lot of things I wish I would have done differently, and I love Jacksonville. I probably should have stayed, but I always thought that given the opportunity,
hold on. Who wouldn't want to? But if you get a chance to go to play with New England, to have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl ring, like Tom Brady's the quarterback, like nobody's going to fault you for that.
Yeah, but it's the business aspect of it. You got to look and say they got Rob Gronkowski, they have Martellus Bennett, they just drafted AJ Derby, they got Michael Williams, they got a pretty full tight end room. In the Patriots, they're not if you're hurt, if you're not picking up the offense, if there's something they don't like, they'll cut anybody. And I had such a good reputation in Jacksonville. I know we weren't winning, but I really loved it there. I love the staff. And that's all, you'll see a lot of players have regrets. And, I don't look at it as a regret. You learn from things like that. But, looking back, I feel like if I would have been able to do it over again, I would have stayed in Jacksonville and just had a long career living in Jacksonville. I loved Florida. I love the city. Duval County is great. So, but hey, you live and you learn.
All the Bears fans get upset when I give too much love to our friends down in Duval County because I love the fan. I think the fans there are underrated, and I find them to be very passionate. And I'm also a wrestling guy, so now I watch AEW. So I'm entwined in Jacksonville and in Duval County. But again, like you went and played with the GOAT, like that's a decision I feel like I would have made too. So I can't fault you for that. Like that's not a bad thing. I also admired the fact that you showed up on The Bachelorette. It was Rebecca's season. I was excited. I was pumped up when you showed up. I thought it was cool because, us fantasy people, we're big Clay Harbor guys. So when you showed up, I was like fired up. I'm like, all right, let's see how this goes. And we were invested in the show. How was that experience for you?
Honestly, it was a really cool experience. Unfortunately, I got hurt on the show. I
was playing football, right?
Player who got hurt playing football. Man, you know your stuff.
I watched the show.
This guy doesn't miss anything over here. Wow. Yeah, but I mean, I'm like, when I got hurt, I'm like, is this a joke? Like, how did this happen? I'm over here playing with the best athletes in the world, and I break my wrist stiff arming a male model and and a beer salesman. I'm like, this is you can't write this stuff. And it really happened. But what people don't know is the year before when I'm playing with New Orleans, the first game of the season, I actually broke my wrist and my toe in the same game. Yeah. I had just been cleared to play again, and that was the first time the doctor didn't fix my wrist right. So I re-broke it. Then I had to go and get it fixed, and then I did this whole rehab. And I actually and that was the last game I played was actually on The Bachelor, which is hilarious. But the next off season, I have a bunch of workouts coming up. And because I was rehabbing my wrist, it was just like this crazy like events that happened leading up to this. So I have a bunch of workouts scheduled. I had the Bills and I had the 49ers. I'm in New York City rehabbing with the best wrist doctor, and there's no fields in New York City. So you have to find like places to play. The one turf field we had concrete all the way around the field, like an arena football field almost. I'm running routes out there, just trying to get ready for this workout with the Bills, making sure my wrist is good. My toes, everything's feeling better. Brian Dable was the offensive coordinator. Obviously, he's the head coach of the Giants now, but he was my tight end coach at New England, and I loved him. He loved me. He wanted to bring me in, and he's like, got a good chance to play. You're healthy and in shape. We're going to sign you. Perfect. So 2 weeks beforehand, I'm running routes out in New York City. I run into my trainer, I'm like, hey, just make sure you don't lead me into a wall out here. I run a corner route. I lose track of where I am. I run full speed into a wall. And my side, it's an open wound. I can barely walk and finally get to where I can run. I have to make a decision. Do I go to this workout with my side still locked up, but I can run finally by the time this comes? Or do I cancel and be like, hey, like if you guys still need a guy in a few weeks, like bring me back. So I'm like, dude, I can get through this. Because after this, there was like 2.5, 3 weeks until training camp. So I go, I get through this, I rehab, then I'll be ready to go for the season. So I just got to get through this workout, make sure everything's okay. I go to the workout, happy I made a decision. I'm running around, blocking, I'm catching everything. Halfway through the workout, I run a dig route that I've ran a million times. I end up tearing my groin on that side because everything was so locked up, and I was out for 6 months. I missed the whole season, had to cancel all my workouts, and that's how my career ended. On the field, getting ready to sign with the Bills, would have been my 10th year, and I tore my groin, and that was the last opportunity I got because I missed the whole year. teams calling periodically through the year,
Yeah.
hey, is this guy ready to go? And I wasn't because of my groin. So it's pretty crazy. Now I feel great. And I'm like, wow, I think I honestly could still play. But once you're out the league, it's hard to get back in, you know?
Yeah, understandably. Yeah. Once you've made that decision to move on, I guess it's probably pretty difficult to ramp back up and get back out onto the field.
Yeah.
But did you ever but I don't want to like harbor on the Bachelorette stuff. Did they ever ask you to be the Bachelor though? Because that, to me, like of all the things, I'm like, why? That was the thing I think that offended me the most. Like, why are you on Rebecca's season? Like, you should be the Bachelor. Why was that never discussed?
So, funny thing about that is they wanted me to be they wanted me to go to Bachelor in Paradise to have the opportunity to be the Bachelor. They wanted me to go to the Men Tell All to have the opportunity to be the Bachelor. And at that point, right after my season, I'm like, no, I got to go rehab because I'm still playing football. So instead of going and continuing this Bachelor world, I ended up going to try to rehab and get ready for football. And I made the right decision because I didn't know that I was going to friggin' run into this wall, end up tearing my groin. Then after I did all that, I'm like, hey, I'll go back on Paradise and let's see what happens. And then Paradise didn't go well for me. If you ever watch Bachelor in Paradise, because
I didn't want to bring up Bachelor. I wasn't going to bring up BIP. I had a mental note not to bring up BIP, but
so I was dating this girl. And we didn't get engaged. And it was weird how they edited it to make it look like I had like let her on and we dated for 2 weeks. And I'm like, hey, I want to date you and see where this goes. And people didn't like that. They want you to get down on a knee and
it's crazy.
Yeah. And then
it's insane.
Break up in a couple weeks. And I'm like, if I'm going to propose, I'm going to do it once. You know, that's my thoughts about it. So I didn't propose, and a lot of people thought it was a good idea, and like, hey, we respect that. Then a lot of people like, oh, this guy, he let her on, he didn't even propose at the end. I'm like, yo, I knew her for 2 weeks, so let's take this thing slow. You know,
that was the point. See, I felt like you came off like the rational human being. That's why they don't like you on the reality TV, because that's a basic human response. Like, no, I'm not going on television dating somebody for 2 weeks in the tropics of Mexico and then getting engaged. That's insanity. I felt you made the right move.
It does not play well for rational humans on that show. Like, hey, why don't we just date after this and then see what happens? Oh, absolutely not. I'm not wasting that time. It's been 2 weeks. What are you talking about? Let's get to know each other. Let's meet each other's moms first. I don't know.
Right? You don't even know her friends.
Let's meet your best friend. You know, let's go out to a dinner outside of the beach once.
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Chris Harrison shows up and starts badgering you. Like, leave him alone.
Man, you know your stuff. I'm
impressed. This man's a legend. Listen,
yeah.
I am not BSing you. Like, that's the one thing. Like, I would not pretend to just to shower you with platitudes or anything like that. But I legitimately, and I've actually fallen off The Bachelor. I think I took The Bachelor in Paradise worse than you. I think that's the last time I watched it. I'm like, this is unconscionable. And I'm trying to, and my friends now, because I'm a goofball, I'm like, Clay Harbor, like that's our guy from like you're a Chicago guy that played for Jacksonville. Like, this hits all the notes for me. Like, if you started professional wrestling, I would be your biggest fan, although I'm almost already there. But I was upset for you, and I'm glad though that you've recovered and you're doing well and everything's going good for you. I do want to ask though, as we start to wrap up a little bit.
Yeah.
Going back to the Bears.
Yeah.
What is your expectations for the team this season? Like, what should we, and you're somebody who played, so you'll have, you know, as fans, I'm like, they should win double digits. Why not? But realistically, what should be the expectations for the Bears this season?
You know, I've been going back and forth on this as a fan of what I expect, you know, and my expectations are kind of low. You know, I think maybe a 500 season. Obviously, that's not possible when you're playing 17.
We could tie somebody. So maybe.
I guess. But I really do. I don't want to get people's hopes up, but I really think they're going to outplay their expectations.
Yeah,
I really think, you know, at first I'm like, no, just come in with even keel. But I really think this team is built in a way to where everybody's discounting them in the national media and nobody expects them to do anything. And that's when you take a lot of pressure off. And you got Fields coming into his second year. He's got some experience under his belt. You got a guy like David Montgomery. Mooney's getting disrespected in the media. Kmet's poised for a big year. Obviously, the O-line, you have some issues there. But I think these guys can gel together. You don't have to have any superstars on an O-line to have a good, great offensive line. It's how you play together. Couple late draft picks, see how they do. Lucas Patrick, a couple of free agents, and then a young, hungry defense, good draft for the defense. Obviously you got to replace some guys. You got Roquan Smith there in the middle, but I think this team could surprise some people. And I think it will. If you had to ask me, I think there's this team could sneak in the playoffs, and I think it will. My prediction. I don't think the NFC North is what it was. Obviously, you got to get past Aaron Rodgers there. You got the Lions. They're always kind of down too. So
yeah,
Vikings, Kirk Cousins is tough team, underrated team. Jefferson, you got a lot of weapons on that team. And I think you look at Kirk Cousins' stats, you think this guy would be winning Super Bowls, but he's not somehow. But I think it's a winnable division, and I expect the Bears to. My prediction is sneak in the playoffs, sneak in the wild card, and then see what happens.
See what happens. A lot like Philadelphia last year did with Jalen Hurts. So, and I guess I would assume that you feel pretty comfortable with Justin Fields and some of the things he was able to show last year. Because that, to me, is the biggest, probably the biggest key. I think Justin Fields has the ability, and if they run, more play action, kind of play to his strengths, I think he has a chance to break out this year.
Yeah, I was very critical of Justin Fields last year, but you got to realize that this guy just turned 23 years old. I thought he was late on some throws, just looking at him. But then you take a step back and you say, hey, this guy got thrown in the middle of the season. He wasn't the guy getting the reps during OTAs or training camp or even preseason with the first team. You put this guy in the middle. What do you expect to happen? The offensive line isn't great. So looking at that, I think this year will be huge for him. And you saw the glimpses, the flashes of what he could do out the pocket, in the pocket. He made some great plays. And honestly, there was a lot of drops last year.
Yeah.
Like looking back at some of the game, even Allen Robinson, I'm looking back at some of these games. I'm like, dang, A-Rob was making those drops. Like there were some drops last year with some good balls with Fields, and I expect him to really come back. The leader of this team now, he's putting in the work. He's earned the respect of the players and have a big year. So I'm a believer.
I love to hear it. Yeah, I remember because I obviously I follow you on Twitter, so I remember. Listen, I was making mental notes. You were, but I know that you also played, and you watch it probably a little bit more differently than everybody else because you understand, everything that we're seeing. But it feels like how big of a difference. But you mentioned it, when it's your team. It's way different. And those first team reps, because, he didn't work with Allen Robinson. So do a lot of those things, like with Allen Robinson making drops last year, does that stem from the fact that Justin Fields didn't really practice with him much?
He's not going against the one. He's not playing with the ones, and he's not going against the one defense. It's a two-way street there. Being a career backup, I'd be in on the 2 tight end sets, 3 tight end, but when I'm playing number 1 tight end, for me, I feel like it's almost discounted because I'm beating this dude right here like a drum, but this dude's not going to make the team. Right. I'm like, okay. And then even the coaches and the players, like, oh yeah, nice route. You just, ran a route against, Sam Brown over here, who's from, Wesleyan Central University, who is a walk-on guy, whatever. So you get to play against the starting defense. You get to see the speed of the game improves when you're playing against these guys on the first team. And you also get to build that repertoire. You get to build that experience with the number 1 guys. Now he's going to be throwing to the guys he's going to be throwing to in the game. And so the second team guys, the second team tight end playing into second defense. So to me, that's huge in training camp, OTAs, not just because you're getting the reps with the guys, but because the competition you are playing against is more realistic, and you're getting to play against all-pro middle linebacker Roquan Smith every day, instead of the second team linebacker that probably wouldn't be starting on any team. It's going to make you better, and you're going to be better because you're playing against, the team you're going to be playing with in the game.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And it's one of the reasons why I feel like they're definitely going to be making a run for the playoffs. I love it. Everybody talks about Detroit, and every year Detroit's going to make a run every year, and it never happens. Minnesota, as you said, Kirk Cousins is a great statistical quarterback, and it's never translated. Green Bay is going to be fine, but when you look at their receiver room compared to the Bears receiver room, like I'm not saying Alan Lazard is not better than Darnell Mooney.
No.
Sammy Watkins to me is not better than Byron Pringle. Like,
Yeah.
it's very easy. Like, obviously Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks of all time, but it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think Bear fans need to concede anything. And if everybody wants to come onto our social medias and be like, you guys are trying to make something out of nothing, like, well, number one, we're fans, so yes. And number two, like, there is evidence here that this could be a very good team. And to mention the defense, completely rebuilt in the secondary. So I kind of like it. I like that you're on board with me.
I'm on board, man. And it's funny, you know your stuff. Like you saw me some of these tweets of Fields last year, but
I saw
taking a step outside the box and looking back and what he did. And this year, I'm really excited to see him. I know in the past I'm saying, okay, this guy's late. He's not picking up his reads. But then you look at why. And I'm excited. I think he's going to make, and you hear coming out of the locker room, the guys talk about him, the coaches talk about him. You love to pull for a guy that is putting in the work and that is a true leader. And I love the fact that that's what he's doing and that's how he's portraying himself. And in my experience, that always works. That always pays off. If you're the guy that's you're the first one and the last one out, you're really the leader of the team and you really care and it matters to you, that's going to trickle down to the whole team, and that's going to be their personality this year. So I'm really excited. I'm happy Fields is the leader of my lifelong team, born into Bears fandom with my mom, my dad, my whole family, both grandmas, big Bears fans. So I'm excited.
No, I love it. By the way, what do you do when you're an NFL player and you're playing in Jacksonville? Do you still sort of follow the Bears? And you still, I mean, obviously, if you're playing them, you want to beat them, but do you kind of still pull for the Bears, even though you're playing for another team?
Yeah, I would pull for the Bears, obviously, unless I wasn't playing for them. So I'd look at the, after you're done, you get on the bus, you know how you played, you check the stats, you look at some of your old teammates, you seen what they're doing, like, oh, wow, he had, like Selleck, when I'm in the Jaguars, they go, Selleck had a big game. Text him, hey, nice work, man. You had 5 for 80. What are they doing? Are you're getting younger over there? What's happening? You message some of your buddies or you see one of your buddies got their brains beat in. Man, what kind of defense you guys running over there? Hey, shut up, bro. It was a tough game. And I'd always look at the Bears, and that was when I was with Jacksonville. I'd look at the Eagles, see how they were doing. No tight ends had numbers. Yeah, I bet they wish they wouldn't have cut me now. Something like that. So you always look at your team and your old players and see how they're doing throughout the whole year.
Would you have ever played for the Packers?
My dad, I remember talking to my dad about this, and he's like, if the Packers draft you, you can't go. But I mean, he was not so much as he was anymore, but he was a diehard Bears fan. I remember my first year, I'm a rookie. I actually had 3 catches that game against the Bears. I only had like 10 catches my whole rookie year. And he showed up the game in Soldier Field with half my family. And my dad is wearing a Bears jersey, and I'm playing with the Eagles in an Eagles hat. I'm like, come on, Dad. He goes, hey, man, I got the hat on. I'm like, I know, but like, dude, like you got to pull I'm your son, and you're still wearing this Bears jersey. Come on.
Did your teammates see that?
Oh, yeah. Afterwards by the bus, they saw half of my family like split between Eagles and Bears stuff. And they're giving me a hard time. Like, hey, man, these guys are lifers. This guy still talks about the 85 Bears like it happened last week. Like, man, this guy's, he's lifetime Bears fan.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine having to take the ribbing that you did when you got back on that bus and they saw it. Although I will tell you that Barry Sanders' dad did the same thing to him when he went to Oklahoma State, and his dad still rooted for Oklahoma. And I think if you go to Mr. Sanders' house now, his Oklahoma helmet is still there. So you're in good company there with the parents. I think my dad would be the same way too. Like if I played for not that I was a good player, but if I played for although my dad hated the 49ers and the Washington team more than anybody. Like he didn't like Green Bay, obviously, but Washington and San Francisco were 2 teams that he loathed and I will never have anything to do with. So I would imagine I would have been in the same boat. So I can understand.
Yeah.
These guys are crazy. They really love the Chicago Bears, some of these old heads.
It's hardcore, man. Those guys, and my dad's like, and he would try to guilt me into. He's like, yeah, and if your grandpa ever saw you playing for the Packers, I'm like, we'll see, man. There's a 1 in 32 chance that I get drafted by him, and luckily I didn't have to deal with that, or he would have been, he wouldn't have been happy for me playing with the Packers.
Oh my gosh. Like, you made it to the NFL. Your grandfather wouldn't have been happy with that. Like, the dream of being an NFL player, but it's the Packers. I can't allow this. That's
literally
tough.
what he was saying. It's crazy.
That's a tough life. But listen, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. We've wanted to do it. I've wanted to do it for quite some time. Big fan. Listen, legitimately big fan. We loved you when you played. Loved you on The Bachelor. Love following you on Twitter now, and appreciate you being a part of this. Hopefully we can have you back at some point. But if you want to go ahead and tell everybody how to follow you on social media, I would like to implore everybody to do that right now.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Twitter, my Twitter handle is just ClayHarbs82. I tweet a lot of Eagles, Jaguars, Bears, NFL stuff. And then, Instagram, more of a lifestyle type page, but ClayHarbs82 on Instagram. And if I do a lot of motivational speaking. If anybody needs a speaker out there, my website is clayharboronline.com, and I'm happy to chat with you guys about that as well. Appreciate you having me on, Adam. It's been fun, and I'm free anytime. Love talking Bears, love talking football.
All right. Well, we're going to hold you to that. Thank you so much for being here. The great Clay Harbor. There he goes. Cannot thank him enough for being a part of the show today. And thanks to everybody who has logged in and has listened. By the way, if you're watching the show right now, and we mentioned this at the top of the show, talking about Frank Gore. Is Frank Gore a Hall of Famer? Make sure in the comments you leave. Let us know what you think. Yes or no. I will say this. Frank Gore is going to go to the Hall of Fame. And it is one of those things that, like, he's got the statistics for it. Now, you ask me, is he on the level of guys like Walter Payton and LaDainian Tomlinson? I think that's a different conversation. But as far as the NFL, the voting goes and everything like that, I think that he eventually does make it. But you know what? That is a subject for another show. So for all the folks here, for Sammy and for everybody here with the Sick Podcast, we want to thank you for being here. Make sure you like and subscribe. Spread the word. Tell everybody you know that you should be listening to the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. And until next week, we will see you Tuesday night. We're going to have another Take It to the Rank. We're going to have Carmen Vital with us. She is awesome. You're not going to want to miss that conversation. So make sure you join us Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. And until then, bear down.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.